I still remember the exact moment my world shifted. It was a Tuesday morning in March, and I was sitting in that sterile conference room on the 42nd floor of the Meridian Tower in downtown Chicago, staring at my boss across the mahogany table. The city sprawled out behind him through floor-to-ceiling windows, but all I could focus on were his cold, calculating eyes as he delivered the words that would change everything. "Sarah, let's be honest here," he said, leaning back in his leather chair with that smug expression I'd grown to despise. "You're replaceable. We all are, but some of us are more replaceable than others." Those words hit me like a physical blow. After 7 years of 60-hour weeks, missed family dinners, and sacrificing my personal life for Henderson and Associates, this was what I got. Not recognition, not appreciation, just a casual dismissal of everything I'd built there. My hands were trembling as I gripped the edge of the table, trying to process what he'd just said. You see, I'd been with Henderson and Associates since right out of college. I was 22 when I started as a junior analyst, fresh-faced and eager to prove myself in the cutthroat world of corporate consulting. The company specialized in helping Fortune 500 companies optimize their operations, and I thought I'd found my calling. I worked my way up methodically, year after year, project after project, client after client. I wasn't the smartest person in the room, but I was definitely the hardest working. By the time I turned 29, I was a senior consultant with my own team of 6 people. I'd brought in over $12 million in revenue for the company in just 2 years. I had clients specifically requesting me for their projects. I thought I was untouchable. I thought I mattered. But that Tuesday morning, sitting across from Robert Henderson himself, the founder's son who'd taken over the company 3 years earlier, I realized how naive I'd been. The meeting was supposed to be about my promotion to partner. I'd been told by 3 different managing directors that it was essentially a done deal. My numbers were stellar, my client relationships were rock solid, and I'd been mentoring the junior staff for years. Instead, Robert was telling me that they were restructuring the partnership track, that they needed to be more selective, that market conditions were challenging. All corporate speak for, "We're giving your promotion to someone else." And that someone else was Marcus Webb, a guy who'd been with the company for 4 years and whose biggest claim to fame was being Robert's fraternity brother from Northwestern. "I don't understand," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "My performance reviews have been exceptional. I've exceeded every target you've set for me. What more do you want?" Robert adjusted his tie and gave me that patronizing smile that made my skin crawl. "Sarah, you do good work, solid work. But good work isn't enough anymore. We need people who can think bigger, who can see the forest for the trees. Marcus brings a fresh perspective, a strategic vision that, frankly, you just don't have." Strategic vision. That was rich coming from a guy who'd inherited his position and spent more time on the golf course than in the office. But I sat there and took it, because that's what I'd been doing for years. Taking it, accepting it, making excuses for a system that was rigged against people like me. "So, what does this mean for me?" I asked, already knowing the answer would crush whatever remained of my professional dreams. "It means you stay where you are. Senior consultant is nothing to sneeze at. You'll get your annual raise, your bonus. But the partnership track? That's off the table for now. Maybe in a few years, if you can show us that strategic thinking I mentioned." The meeting ended with Robert's assistant escorting me out, and I found myself standing in the hallway, completely numb. 7 years of my life, and I was right back where I started. Worse, actually, because now I knew exactly where I stood in their eyes. I want to pause here and ask you something, because I know some of you watching this have been in similar situations. Have you ever had that moment where you realize that no matter how hard you work, no matter how much you sacrifice, some people will never see your worth? Drop a comment below and let me know, because what happened next might resonate with you in ways you didn't expect. That night, I went home to my cramped 1-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park and did something I hadn't done in years. I cried. Not just a few tears, but the kind of sobbing that comes from somewhere deep in your chest, the kind that leaves you exhausted and hollow. I called my sister Emma, who lives in Portland, and tried to explain what had happened. "Sarah, honey, maybe this is a sign," she said gently. "Maybe it's time to look elsewhere. You've been complaining about that place for years." But I couldn't hear her. I was too angry, too hurt, too invested in proving Robert wrong. I'd spent my entire adult life building my career at Henderson and Associates. It was my identity. Without it, who was I? The next few weeks were a blur of forced smiles and strained interactions. I had to work directly with Marcus on several projects, watching him stumble through presentations I could have delivered in my sleep. The worst part was that everyone knew what had happened. The office gossip mill had churned through the details within hours of my meeting with Robert. I could feel the pitying looks from my colleagues, the awkward conversations that died when I walked into a room. But here's the thing about rock bottom. It gives you a solid foundation to build on. And 3 weeks after that devastating meeting, I got a phone call that would change everything. Sarah Chen? The voice was unfamiliar, crisp, and professional. Yes, this is Sarah. My name is Victoria Reeves. I'm the managing partner at Sterling Solutions. I'd like to take you to lunch. Sterling Solutions, Henderson and Associates' biggest competitor, the company that had been winning contracts left and right, poaching clients and talent from established firms like mine. Or rather, like Robert's. I'm not sure that's appropriate, I said carefully. I'm currently employed by Henderson and Associates. Victoria laughed, a warm sound that somehow put me at ease. Sarah, I'm not asking you to commit espionage. I'm asking you to have a conversation over a really good pasta. Are you free Thursday? I should have said no. I should have politely declined and forgotten about the call. But something in Victoria's voice, a confidence and directness that I'd never heard from Robert, made me say yes. We met at Gibson's, an upscale steakhouse in the Loop. Victoria was nothing like what I'd expected. She was probably in her early 50s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. She wore a perfectly tailored black suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, but she didn't carry herself with the arrogance I'd come to associate with successful executives. Let's cut to the chase, she said after we'd ordered. I know what happened with your partnership track at Henderson. The consulting world is smaller than you think, and news travels fast. My face must have shown my embarrassment, because she held up a hand. Sarah, I'm not here to gossip. I'm here because I've been watching your work for 2 years now. The Branston Industries turnaround? That was brilliant. The efficiency improvements you implemented at Morrison Tech. My team studied your methodology for months. I stared at her, speechless. Someone had been watching my work? Someone thought it was worth studying? I want to offer you something that Robert Henderson never will, Victoria continued. A chance to be a full partner. Not in 5 years, not when you've proven yourself again and again. Now, today. I don't understand, I said, my voice shaking slightly. You barely know me. We've never worked together. Victoria smiled. Sarah, I've built my career on recognizing talent. And you have something that can't be taught. You understand people. You don't just see numbers and processes. You see the human element that makes businesses actually work. That's rare. She slid a folder across the table. This is a formal offer. Partnership at Sterling Solutions with a signing bonus that's triple your current annual salary, plus equity that kicks in immediately. We're growing fast, and we need someone who can help us scale without losing the quality that got us here. I opened the folder with trembling hands. The numbers were staggering. The salary alone was more than I'd ever imagined making, but the equity package was what really caught my attention. If Sterling continued growing at their current rate, I'd be set for life within 5 years. Why me? I asked. You could hire any of the big-name consultants from McKinsey or Bain. Because big names don't always mean big results, Victoria said. I've worked with those guys. They're smart, don't get me wrong, but they're also formulaic. They apply the same solutions to every problem. You think outside the box, you innovate, and most importantly, you care about the people your recommendations affect. I thought about my team back at Henderson and Associates. Jenny, who was brilliant but constantly overlooked for promotions. David, who'd been passed over for senior consultant 3 times despite being the best analyst in the company. Marcus, who'd never had to fight for anything in his life, now making decisions that would affect all of their futures. I need to think about it, I said, closing the folder. Of course. But Sarah, don't think too long. Opportunities like this don't come around often. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the offer letter and trying to process what had just happened. In the span of a few hours, I'd gone from feeling worthless to holding a partnership offer that would change my life. But leaving Henderson and Associates felt like admitting defeat, like proving Robert right about my lack of strategic vision. I called Emma again. "I don't know what to do," I told her. "Part of me wants to stay and fight, to prove them wrong." "Sarah, listen to yourself," she said. "You're talking about staying at a company that just told you you're replaceable. Why would you want to prove anything to people who don't value you?" She was right, of course. But it's hard to let go of something you've invested so much of yourself in. Henderson and Associates wasn't just my job. It was my identity, my social circle, my entire professional world. I spent the next 2 days in a fog, going through the motions at work while my mind raced with possibilities. Every interaction with Robert or Marcus felt surreal, like I was watching it happen to someone else. Did they have any idea what was happening? Did they care? On Thursday evening, I made my decision. I called Victoria and accepted the offer. "Excellent," she said. "Can you start Monday?" "I need to give 2 weeks' notice," I said. "It's the professional thing to do." "Of course, but Sarah, be prepared. They're not going to take this well." She was right. Friday morning, I walked into Robert's office and handed him my resignation letter. He read it once, then looked up at me with a mixture of surprise and anger. "Sterling Solutions," he said flatly. I should have known. "I've given you 2 weeks' notice," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'll make sure all my projects are properly transitioned." Robert stood up and walked to the window, his back to me. "You know what this looks like, don't you, Sarah? It looks like you're running away, like you couldn't handle not getting the promotion, so you're taking your toys and going home." The old me would have apologized, would have tried to explain that it wasn't personal, that I just needed new challenges. But something had changed in me over the past few weeks. Maybe it was Victoria's confidence in my abilities, or maybe it was finally seeing myself clearly for the first time in years. "No, Robert," I said, standing up. "What this looks like is me recognizing my worth and going somewhere that values it. You told me I was replaceable, remember? Well, now you get to find out if that's true." The 2 weeks that followed were among the most awkward of my professional life. Word spread quickly through the office that I was leaving for Sterling Solutions, and the reactions were mixed. Some colleagues congratulated me privately, others treated me like I was radioactive. Robert made it clear that I was persona non grata, excluding me from meetings and making snide comments about loyalty and betrayal. But you know what? I didn't care anymore. For the first time in years, I felt free. I was done trying to prove myself to people who would never see my value. I was done accepting crumbs when I deserved the whole meal. If you're still watching this, I want you to know that sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is having someone tell you that you're not good enough, because it forces you to examine whether you believe them, and if you don't, it gives you the courage to go find people who do see your worth. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to make a tough decision about your career, because this story is far from over. My last day at Henderson and Associates was anticlimactic. I cleaned out my desk, said goodbye to my team, and walked out of the Meridian Tower for the last time. No farewell party, no heartfelt speeches, just a quiet exit from a chapter of my life that had defined me for 7 years. The next Monday, I walked into Sterling Solutions offices in the West Loop, and it was like entering a different world. The space was modern and bright, with an open floor plan that encouraged collaboration. But more than the physical differences, there was an energy there that I'd never experienced at Henderson and Associates. People seemed genuinely excited to be at work. Victoria introduced me to the team at an all-hands meeting. "Everyone, I want you to meet Sarah Chen, our newest partner. She's joining us from Henderson and Associates, where she led some of the most innovative consulting projects I've seen in years. I'm excited to see what she'll accomplish here." The response was warm and welcoming. No one seemed to care that I was the new person or that I'd come from a competitor. They just wanted to know how I could help the team succeed. My first project was with a mid-sized manufacturing company called Apex Industries. They were struggling with efficiency issues in their production line, and traditional consulting firms had recommended massive layoffs and facility closures. The CEO, a guy named Tom Morrison, was desperate for alternatives. "We're a family company," he told me during our first meeting. "My grandfather started this business in 1952. We've got employees who've been with us for 30 years. I can't just throw them out on the street because some spreadsheet says it's more efficient. This was exactly the kind of challenge I lived for. Not just the numbers and processes, but the human element. I spent 2 weeks on the factory floor, talking to workers, understanding their challenges, and observing the actual workflow. What I found wasn't inefficiency. It was a lack of communication between departments and outdated equipment that was creating bottlenecks. Instead of recommending layoffs, I proposed a retraining program that would cross-train workers in multiple departments, allowing for more flexible scheduling and better coverage during peak production times. I also identified several pieces of equipment that could be upgraded cost-effectively, improving efficiency by 30%. The results were immediate and dramatic. Apex not only avoided layoffs, but was able to hire 20 new employees within 6 months. Tom Morrison was so impressed that he became one of Sterling Solutions' biggest advocates, referring 3 other companies to us. But the real validation came 6 months later, when I ran into Marcus Webb at a networking event. He approached me with that same smug expression I remembered from the office. "Sarah, how's the new job treating you? I heard you're at Sterling now." "It's going well," I said simply. "How are things at Henderson?" His expression faltered slightly. "Oh, same old challenges. Actually, we're working on the Apex Industries account now, trying to clean up some of the mess from their previous consultant." I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. Mess? What kind of mess? Well, whoever worked on it before obviously didn't understand the complexity of their operation. They implemented all these feel-good programs that are completely unsustainable. We're having to come in and do the real work now. The real work. Code for layoffs and cost-cutting. I knew exactly what Henderson and Associates was recommending, because it was the same thing they always recommended. Cut costs, increase efficiency, ignore the human impact. "That's too bad," I said. "I hope it works out for everyone involved." 3 months later, I heard through the industry grapevine that Apex Industries had terminated their contract with Henderson and Associates and returned to Sterling Solutions. Apparently, Tom Morrison had been so appalled by their recommendations that he'd shown them the door within a week. This is where I want to pause and talk to those of you who might be in similar situations. Maybe you're feeling undervalued at work, or you're being passed over for promotions, or someone in authority has made you feel like you're not good enough. I want you to know that their opinion of you is not the truth. Sometimes the best thing that can happen is having someone show you exactly who they are, because it gives you permission to find people who see your real value. By the end of my first year at Sterling Solutions, I'd brought in over $20 million in new business. I'd built a team of 12 consultants, all of whom had been recruited from competitors or fresh out of top business schools. We were winning contracts left and right, often beating out Henderson and Associates in head-to-head competitions. But the real moment of vindication came during the annual Chicago Business Journal Awards ceremony. Sterling Solutions had been nominated for Consulting Firm of the Year, competing against much larger, more established companies. I was representing the firm at the ceremony, sitting at a table with Victoria and the other partners. When they announced the winner, I almost couldn't believe it. "Sterling Solutions!" The applause was thunderous, and Victoria nudged me to join her on stage to accept the award. As I looked out at the audience, I spotted Robert Henderson sitting at a table near the back. His face was a mask of barely controlled anger, and I felt a surge of satisfaction that I'm not entirely proud of. But mostly, I felt vindicated. All those years of being told I wasn't strategic enough, wasn't partner material, wasn't irreplaceable, and here I was, accepting an award for excellence in consulting. "This award belongs to our entire team," Victoria said into the microphone. "But I want to specifically thank Sarah Chen, whose innovative approach to human-centered consulting has transformed not just our firm, but the entire industry standard for how we think about organizational change." The mention of my name brought another round of applause, and I saw several people in the audience nodding in recognition. I'd become known in the industry, not as Robert Henderson's disposable employee, but as Sarah Chen, the consultant who'd revolutionized how we approach business transformation. After the ceremony, I was surrounded by people wanting to congratulate me, to network, to learn about our methodologies. It was overwhelming and exhilarating at the same time. But the moment that really mattered came when I was heading to the restroom and encountered Robert in the hallway. "Congratulations," he said. but there was no warmth in his voice. "Quite an achievement." "Thank you," I replied simply. "You know, Sarah, I always knew you had potential. Maybe we were too hasty in our restructuring decisions." I looked at him for a long moment. This man who'd made me feel worthless, who'd told me I was replaceable, who'd treated me like I should be grateful for whatever scraps he threw my way. "Robert," I said finally, "I think you're confusing potential with performance. I was never the problem. Your ability to recognize talent was." He opened his mouth to respond, but I was already walking away. I didn't need his validation anymore. I'd found it elsewhere, in abundance. The next 2 years flew by in a blur of success. Sterling Solutions doubled in size, opening offices in New York and Los Angeles. I was promoted to senior partner and given my own practice area focusing on organizational transformation. My team grew to over 50 consultants, and we were booked solid for 18 months out. But the real satisfaction came from the work itself. We were helping companies transform not just their bottom lines, but their cultures. We were showing them that taking care of employees and being profitable weren't mutually exclusive. We were proving that there was a better way to do business. One of my favorite success stories was a family-owned restaurant chain called Bella's Kitchen. They'd been struggling with high turnover and declining customer satisfaction. Traditional consultants had recommended cutting staff, reducing portions, and implementing more rigid management structures. Instead, we worked with them to improve their training programs, implement profit sharing for employees, and create a culture of empowerment where servers and kitchen staff could make decisions to improve customer experience. The results were incredible. Turnover dropped by 60%, customer satisfaction scores increased dramatically, and revenues grew by 40% in the first year. The owner, Maria Gonzalez, sent me a handwritten note that I still keep in my office. "Sarah, you didn't just save my business, you saved my family's legacy. Thank you for seeing what others couldn't." These were the moments that made all the long hours and difficult decisions worthwhile. This was the work I was meant to do, the impact I was meant to have. And it never would have happened if I'd stayed at Henderson & Associates, accepting Robert's assessment of my worth. Now, I know some of you watching this might be thinking that this is just a feel-good story about someone who got lucky. But let me tell you about the moment that really tested everything I'd built. It was 3 years after I'd left Henderson & Associates. I was in my office late one evening, working on a proposal for a major automotive manufacturer, when Victoria knocked on my door. "Sarah, we need to talk," she said, and something in her tone made my stomach drop. She came in and closed the door behind her. "I've been offered a position as CEO of Meridian Consulting Group. It's a huge opportunity, but it means I'll be stepping down from Sterling Solutions." Meridian Consulting Group was one of the biggest firms in the country. For Victoria, it was the career opportunity of a lifetime. But for me, it felt like the ground was shifting beneath my feet again. "Who's taking over?" I asked, though I was pretty sure I knew the answer. "The board wants you to be the new managing partner," she said. "You've built something incredible here, Sarah. The team trusts you, the clients respect you, and you understand the vision better than anyone. Managing partner. The top position at Sterling Solutions. Everything I'd ever dreamed of professionally was being handed to me. But it also meant that Victoria, my mentor and advocate, would be leaving. "I don't know if I'm ready," I admitted. "You've been the face of this company. What if I can't fill those shoes?" Victoria smiled. "Sarah, you're not filling my shoes. You're wearing your own, and they're going to take you places I never could have imagined." The transition happened over the next 3 months. Victoria introduced me to key clients, walked me through strategic partnerships, and helped me understand the financial complexities of running a consulting firm. But more importantly, she helped me develop confidence in my own leadership style. "You don't have to be me," she told me during one of our sessions. "You just have to be the best version of yourself. That's what got you here, and that's what will keep you successful." My first year as managing partner was challenging in ways I hadn't expected. It's one thing to be responsible for your own success, but quite another to be responsible for the success of an entire organization. I had to learn how to balance the needs of over 100 employees, maintain relationships with dozens of clients, and navigate the complex politics of the consulting industry. but I also had the opportunity to implement my vision for what a consulting firm could be. We became the first major firm to implement a 4-day work week, recognizing that our people did their best work when they weren't burned out. We started a mentorship program pairing senior consultants with junior staff, creating clear pathways for advancement. We implemented transparent salary bands and profit-sharing programs that ensured everyone benefited from the company's success. The results spoke for themselves. Our employee retention rate was the highest in the industry. Our client satisfaction scores were off the charts, and our revenues continued to grow year over year. We were proving that doing business differently wasn't just possible, it was profitable. But the moment that really validated everything came 5 years after I'd taken over as managing partner. I was keynoting a conference on organizational transformation, speaking to over 1,000 business leaders about the importance of human-centered consulting. After my presentation, a young woman approached me. She was probably in her mid-20s, with the eager energy I remembered from my own early career days. "Ms. Chen," she said, "I just wanted to thank you. I read about your work at Sterling Solutions in business school, and it completely changed how I think about consulting. I'm starting my own firm next month, and I want to follow